Tulsi starts a new podcast, fam.
Oh,
Freedom of
and I
speech.
know Emma Vigilant already had a tweet saying, "Oh my God, she was on Dave Rubin."
Yeah.
Or Shift. Oh,
Yeah.
she has a parlor. Like, what? So who
Yes.
cares?
Let's take a look what she has to say about the freedom of speech. And let me tell you something, fam. She's no longer an elected official.
Yeah.
I think you're going to hear her name drop a lot more on her show
Yeah.
and kind of point the air at who. I'm thinking she's going to be the anti-AOC person. Check it out.
Thank God.
dangerous thing that is an unprecedented threat to the freedom of speech. We're not hearing that from many people in our own government at the highest levels, which should raise alarm bells given our society is set up on this foundation of fundamental freedoms, foremost among which is that freedom of speech. And again, I think this should be a cause for a lot of introspection amongst us as people, but also in holding our own leaders accountable, saying, how can you support this? The thing that is always interesting to me, and that I've seen numerous examples of, especially over the last year, is how people, like AOC and others, support these actions. But what happens if, Jack leaves Twitter and it's taken over by somebody who holds values different from AOC, and then the tables are turned and they decide, actually, you know what? We don't want to hear what you have to say. You hold views that we believe to be a threat to those that, that are held by the corporate, the C-suite boards or whatever of these. So the point being, like, the tables can turn very quickly, and that's really the danger of this. And when we talk about free speech, we talk about free speech, whether it's speech that we agree with or we don't agree with. We have to stand up in protection of that freedom, because if we only do it for our tribe or our people or people who we agree with, then we're really undermining that freedom overall.
There you go.
And of course, it's.
So it pretty much explains why the Democratic Party sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, the Republican Party sucks too. Most of those rhinos, they would say you're censoring the wrong people, but they had these lone wolves of libertarian-minded people who were like, hey man, we got to stop this censorship, whatnot, fam. And AOC, she got called out by Tulsi right there. Tulsi got called out multiple people, but she did call out AOC
because she's a fucking hypocrite. And
Tulsi is the ringleader of this shit.
Yeah, and Tulsi, whatever you may agree with her or not on her policies, I don't agree with everything she says. Like I said, I think she's more to the right of me, and so we have our differences. She's pretty transparent of what she believes in, even if it hurts her. She's pretty transparent of what she believes in, whereas AOC frames things and tries to gaslight people into making them believe that she's on their side. Typical neoliberal Democrat tactic. She is the new wave of neoliberals with a little bit more woke on the surface, and that's all it is. And Tulsi calling her out really makes me happy, because I mean, the things that I'm saying, I didn't even know Tulsi felt this way 100%. I had an inkling because of her legislation and her push to help whistleblowers, to help Julian Assange. She was the only one in the Democratic side to actually talk about that. But I didn't necessarily think she felt this way, or I didn't get my ideas from Tulsi. I mean, I think she has raised concern for a lot of people, and I think she's a uniter, meaning she unites people across the aisle, and that's very dangerous for the establishment, which is why they smeared her endlessly. And people like us too were in that way. Even though I'm more to the left of her, that doesn't mean that I can't also see that there are people who are politically homeless right now and really looking for somebody to convince them, hey, if you fight for a single payer, then maybe we can end wars. Maybe we can reduce the corruption in our government. Maybe we can get back to helping people get jobs in America instead of outsourcing jobs abroad. We can have these conversations, but when you vilify and say, wow, she's on Dave Rubin, that means she's a right winger, then you literally already have decided, based on who that person is, that they're nothing they say is relevant. And that's not how it should be. It's backwards thinking. It's a fallacy. It's a logical fallacy. Some people who you may not agree with ideologically may say something that's correct. And the echo chamber, neoliberal, neo-progressive boutique left doesn't have a way to even do that. They automatically just dismiss people.
Yeah. I mean, and to me, it was never about Tulsi herself. It was about the policies. Very vocal about 230, talking about this freedom of speech, ending the regime change wars, all that stuff in one. You mentioned about the whole whistleblowing thing. Talking about Daniel Ellsberg. What he had talked about, continuing his work, pardoning Assange, pardoning Snowden. Rewriting
a real threat to the security state.
Exactly. Even talking about elections too. The only ones back in the days. That's why she's always been on par. I'm not going to agree with everything she does and stuff. I probably agree a lot more than you do and whatnot and stuff like that. But I mean, this is the problem we have, and even the fact that we had that Trump supporter that I talked to, and I let people know that, hey, listen, I supported Tulsi because I want them to know when I'm going to talk to them that I'm not going to be attacking them. I'm going to be talking about things that we have in common, and a person who's going to reach across the aisle and say, let's talk about our differences. I mentioned to that gentleman right away that I am for Medicare for all, and I said, I know you're not, and I'm for some type of climate change like the Off Fossil Fuel Act and those sort of things. You're probably not there. And he started talking about that. I said, let's get off that and get back to what we're talking about today. But that's the thing. It's about understanding everything as a whole and looking at the nuance of the situation. Freedom of speech is important. And she said it plain and simple. What happens if somebody else takes over Twitter eventually and doesn't like your ideology and shuts you down? Whether we like it or not, these companies, even if they are privately owned, they broke antitrust laws. And what has become, Twitter has become, just like Facebook and all these other big platforms, they have become the public square. Okay? Mm-hmm. We can't shut down voices. Now, when it comes to Parler in the situation when it came to shutting them down, and in this Dave Rubin interview, David says, well, what would you do? Would you just abide by the law and that's it? And she goes, yeah, I would abide by the law. In other words, I would take down things that are
actual violence.
Actual inciting violence. You can't yell fire in a loaded theater because it might cause people to kill themselves and stamping and whatnot. It's illegal. So Johnny has the Parler up real quick. Johnny, let's go to that because I think it's the same spot right here. The freedom of speech. This is something that needs to be taken down off Parler. It says, I can barely read. We the Patriots the millions have arrived in Washington, D.C. carrying banners for the support for the greatest president in the world has ever known. But if we must, many of us will return on January 19th, carrying our weapons in the support of the nation's resolve to which the world will never forget. Now, listen.
You think that should be taken down?
I think so. Let's come close to it.
I don't even think so.
You're telling people to bring your weapons there.
Yeah. Well, he's saying many of us will return carrying our weapons. I think it's
borderline.
It's borderline.
It's questionable.
I don't even think that. I think you could restrict that. I don't know, flag it. Because a lot of people are saying that. Now, if you're going to say, we're going to come and we're going to invade you at this time, get ready. Like, if you take it up a notch, I think for sure. Either way, I don't see that there.
Well,
but either way,
numbers that no standing army or police agency can match. However, the police are not our enemy unless they choose to be.
Which is dumb because they're the police state.
Well, that's the thing. They're going to serve the masters at the end of the day and stuff. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's a point of saying, the common folk right now can be police officers, whatever, our neighbors or whatever. But they serve the rich. They're class traders. They always have been. If you didn't see that, what they were doing, we would, come on, Blue, we fought for you. As you're getting tear gassed.
Yeah, they're not your friends.
Hello?
And you could even say that, this is could get spread and people could do it. Yeah, you could even say that and take it down.
It's questionable.
That is actually something that, But what Donald Trump did, there is absolutely no proof that he was actually doing anything remotely close to that. And it's not because I'm defending Trump. It's because I'm defending the exaggeration and the hyperbole that is being used it will be used eventually to target any dissent, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's
keep going?
Yeah.
Before we do any super chats? Okay,
yeah.
My bad. Lady goes off on Chuck the Schmuck Schumer. Check this out. Not on YouTube.
Of this idea that you need unanimous consent for every senator to call back the office.
What a racist. I'm glad what the Trump protester did. Take your hands off me. No, you don't need to talk to me. I'm talking to this racist anti-Semite. I am glad. I didn't think that the Trumpsters had it in them. I didn't think the conservatives did. Because you know what? You racist socialists can dish it out, but you can't take it. And remember this. Adolf Hitler was a socialist, and that's exactly who you follow. You're nothing but a coward. See, you kind of need your death. I actually got sexually excited over it. That's how much I loathe you. That's how much I'm glad what they do. And
wow.
Well, I don't agree with the socialist part, and she keeps going off. I mean, the thing is that, and I still have this kind of disagreements with a lot of people on the right that, it's socialism that's coming. Like, guys, please let's stop about that. What you're really scared about is what they called you. fascism, suppressing your speech.
Yeah.
The state,
that's what it is.
You know,
Merging
merging with the corporations, and especially big tech. But that's the thing, and I mean, there is dislike for people like Chuck the Schmuck.
There's dislike, and people are going to blame the boogeyman on the right. They're going to blame socialism, and on the left, they're going to blame white supremacy. When it's really, in general, it's this authoritarian fascism that is attacking both any sort of dissent on the left or the right, and that's the problem that we have to really see. Stop. I urge the right to stop thinking it's socialism, and they are so far from being socialist. It's not even funny. Stop saying shit like that. It literally discredits anything you say with us, because that is what people on the left hear that and they're like, you're a fucking moron, because you have to understand that it's not the socialism, it's authoritarianism. Yeah. And there can be authoritarianism in more leftist spheres, and there can be authoritarianism obviously on the right. Yeah. And I'm against those authoritarian leftists that want to like form this sort of like authoritarian land where only whatever they dictate is legal, everything else is bad. And that I'm entirely against that. And I'm a leftist, and I consider myself more on the anarchist type of left, and I don't believe in anything that those people believe in. And I'm telling you, that is not the socialism that I have imagined in my head. And it's that behavior from the authoritarian left that gives impetus to the right to fear that, because that's what they're talking about. That's what they see, and that's what you're becoming, neo-progressives, when you fucking peddle this shit.
Mom says, watch with the cursing. Bernie Sanders, she says.
Bernie Sanders said,
I'm going to read this.
Yes, you read that.
My Bernie verse. In the past, Republicans used budget reconciliation to pass massive tax breaks for the rich and large corporations with a simple majority vote. As the incoming chairman of the Budget Committee, I will fight to use the same process to boldly address the needs of the working families. And everybody will get free knishes every February.
Thank you, Bernie. So Bernie has these plans, right, as the chair of the Senate Budget Committee, and I believe I put them down here. Okay, so of course, even though the Democrats are going to have a very small, minute, narrow control of the Senate, he's expected to have influence over the taxes, healthcare, climate change, and several other domestic issues. He is going to have control over, like what he mentioned, this tool called the reconciliation, which allows Congress to move some legislation without gaining 60 votes. And this has become a vehicle for several major legislative efforts of this century, including tax cuts under President Trump and President George W. Bush, and the final version of Barack Obama's signature health care bill, which was a failure, the ACA. Ooh. And then Sanders also said in this interview he wanted an initial emergency stimulus package to be, quote, big. He thinks it must include an additional $1,400 in direct payments for adults and children on top of the $600 that Congress just passed, along with money for states and cities to fund coronavirus vaccine distribution, testing, and contact tracing. He wants to also create a universal health care plan during the pandemic so people can get treatment whether or not they have insurance. He said he has been speaking with Biden, but he said, and this is really important as you can see his change in rhetoric, he said that he did not intend to try to force his long-held priorities, such as Medicare for All, into a relief bill, which is, I get why he's doing that, but it's also like, hello, this is a time to actually fucking do that, Bernie. But, Biden says that they're going to work closely with Sanders, blah, blah, blah. But, of course, Biden is against Medicare for All. Sanders' presidential campaign proposals dwarf Biden's cost in breach. Biden, of course, doesn't support Medicare for All and has empathized that the health care would be temporary if they even do that. And Biden's nearly, of course, tapped Bernie Sanders to be his labor secretary, though he decided against it. Reportedly because it would have risked losing Sanders' seat and Senate control in a special election. And of course, we know that Joe Manchin and other moderate Democrats refuse, right? Pretty much, I mean, he's a right-winger, let's be real. That an additional $1,400 is absolutely unacceptable. They do not want that. So again, this is why you don't just vote for Democrats. And Harry Reid even highlights that Bernie isn't that much of a radical, that he's never caused them that many problems. And he was the ranking member on the Budget Committee in 2014. And he said, even though he is a person who is known as a real progressive socialist, he never was a problem for my caucus. He didn't try to be a rebel. So there you go again. Bernie Sanders isn't the rebel that a lot of people thought he was. He actually is very nuanced when it comes to politics on the legislative insider level. And the issue he's going to run into is Neera Tanden. Neera Tanden is either going to be confirmed or denied to be the director of Office of Management and Budget. She's directly opposed everything he's ever stood for. Directly opposed all of the progressives and all of his supporters as well. So he doesn't want to talk about her. He said, let me not worry about Nira right now. And adding that his top priority is going to be the stimulus. So there we are.
Before we play the Army investigation of the officer for the possible psyops in D.C., I just want to point something out because since we were on Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Really quickly, and I talked about, like, you know, what had happened. Like, I think we had a show, and I was saying, what did Donald Trump actually do to incite violence? Because I remember him saying, we got to go and we got to fight like hell. We got to fight hard. And we're going to march to the Capitol, but we're going to do it with peace because we're the party of law and order. And by those standards, when they start taking little multiple pieces of Donald Trump saying this and stuff, and he said, I didn't put it in the folder because I don't want to sit here and kind of defend Donald Trump all the time on this situation, but he didn't incite violence. He said several times throughout that speech, we're going to do it peacefully. Look what Bernie says at the end of this Orff film, and I love Matt Orff. We got to meet him over the weekend, but isn't this by the same standards what the Democrats are trying to accuse Donald Trump of? The same thing? Take a look.
And I say enough is enough. Stand up, fight back, and make this government work for all of us.
Now, I'm just saying, that's just normal talk. That's normal red. Stand up, fight back. You know what I'm saying? We're going to march to the Capitol. We've started protest on the floor, on the steps of Capitol.
It should have been Bernie saying we're going to march to the Capitol and we're going to protest peacefully until we get Medicare for all. That's what I really would have been like. I agree. I'm not saying that I support the tactics that some of these people use. In fact, some of their own supporters were dismissing the tactics. They didn't like that. They were like, this was all good until those dumbasses went up there and started doing that. You can't create a monolith out of a group that isn't a monolith. And that's the thing. We don't like it when the right does it to us. We need to stop doing it to them as well.
Especially right now because they're using it to censor us.
Exactly.
They're going down to, you know what I'm saying? Because we've showed other leftist channels that have been taken down. I still can't believe the city council, People's City Council in LA. I mean, that is just like blows my mind, ladies and gentlemen. These people are fighting for people to not get evicted. And they're showing up on Garcia's house saying, stop making people homeless in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, come on. Bam.
So the Army's investigating a PSYOPs officer for role in Washington on day of Capitol riot. Captain Emily Rainey led North Carolina group to Trump rally. And psychological operations officer Rainey, I am a private citizen. So she says. So this of course obviously led to the quote deadly riot in the Capitol by supporters of Donald Trump. Commanders at Fort Bragg are reviewing her involvement in last week's events in the nation's capital, but she said she acted within military regulations and that no one in her group broke the law. She said, quote, I was a private citizen and doing everything right and within my rights, end quote. And she told the AP this on Sunday. She led 100 members of Moore County Citizens for Freedom, which describes itself online as a nonpartisan network promoting conservative values to Washington to stand against election fraud and support Trump. She said the group attended the rally, but she didn't know of anyone who entered the Capitol and that they were headed back to their buses hours before an emergency curfew took effect. She's 30 and is assigned to the 4th Psychological Operations Group at Fort Bragg, according to Maj Daniel Lessard, a spokesman for the 1st Special Forces Command known as PSYOPs. The group uses information and misinformation to shape the emotions, decision-making, and actions of American adversaries. She made headlines in May after she posted a video online of her pulling down caution tape at the playground that was closed under North Carolina's COVID restrictions. Blah, blah, blah. So far, 90 people have been arrested. She said that her group and most people who travel to Washington are, quote, are peace-loving, law-abiding people who are doing nothing but demonstrating our First Amendment rights. Members of the U.S. military are permitted to take part in political organizations and events out of uniform. However, there are caveats. The Department of Defense directive prohibits active duty service members from sponsoring partisan organizations. It is unclear if Rainey's participation with her group on Wednesday went against DOD policy. She said she attended the rally while she was on leave and did not advertise that she was an Army officer. So
it's very fishy, fam.
Yeah. So again, like, you know,
4chaner.
Ourselves and Whitney Webb and several others that were there, you know, Steve from Slow News Day have been talking about how this is a giant psyops, right? So, like how this was a long time coming. This is what they wanted to do to rein in the next Patriot Act, Patriot Act 3.0 that you want to talk about, like this whole crackdown via censorship, via to just use the Republicans as a scapegoat, but really when it comes down to it, really attack a lot of the left and dissenting opinions, criticizing the establishment and the oligarchy. And so when we saw that all these people were let in, like they were going for a museum tour, that really sends a signal like, wait a minute, something is off here. Why would they just let people in and let them do whatever they want? You're right. Like if this was an actual group of people that were really a threat and they didn't expect it and they felt threatened, they would have already brought out so much security. That didn't happen. So there's a reason for that. We need to keep investigating this. It's not a conspiracy to question what happened, because what happened is really, really strange. Yeah. They had more cops out there ready with zip ties. The cops had zip ties, which is interesting enough, because some of these protesters were found with zip ties, but the cops had zip ties when they were getting ready to arrest us for talking about force the vote and Medicare for all. But they had like nobody there really to really curtail these protesters. It's a little weird whether or not it's coming from I believe it's coming it's deeper than a left-right paradigm. I believe this is the establishment, the three-letter agencies pushing this sort of altercation to bring crackdowns, and more evidence is going to come up to prove that. I think it's hard to say now this is what I think, because it's hard to find proof in that. The media is shaping this in a certain way. They're shaping this as an insurrection, as a coup, as a terrorist attack. So it's hard to speak against it, but
the way the mass censorship came out right away was really concerning. It was like, wait a second, the impeachment,
the resolution by Cory Bush.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I think even though the New York Times had a couple articles that dropped right away, it was the Washington Post. Caitlin Johnstone wrote about it. It was just very fishy the way everything kind of took place. It doesn't seem kosher.